interestingly is I used to have a friend of mine. I've lost contact with her, but she was working at there's a treatment center here, and it does adolescents and adults, and it does alcohol, drugs, mental illness, a lot of what people might need to be put into a center for to kind of detox off of, or stabilize from. And she was like from Indiana, and she ended up working here at one of the treatment centers, and she said to me, because she was coming to me for therapy, treatment, hands-on treatment, and one of the things she said to me is that like in particular our area, Reno, Nevada, or Las Vegas, we have a hereditary kind of mindset. Alcohol and drugs and gambling play a huge role in people's lives here, because you could literally sit at the same bar indefinitely as long as you have money. I mean, bars don't close here. You could sit at a casino bar 24/7 for the next 7 months as long as you had money to keep buying drinks or gamble or whatever else. And then there's the drugs, huge drugs that go along with it. And she said that she was shocked because in this area, she said there's at least 5 generations of alcoholism. So alcoholism is a hereditary thing, right? And so the kids are kind of start drinking at a really young age, 8th grade. And I kind of fell into some of this stuff when I was younger. Me and my friends would, steal booze from, my parents' house, like in 8th grade, and go out and drink. And so, when you have areas, especially like in America or other places where you have hereditary demise, right? So then that means that they're doing drugs and drinking really young, then they're not eating proper food. There's also these emotional components of not having coping skills and not being able to deal with life and reality, which means that you kind of fall by the wayside in your life. I mean, most of the people that I grew up with in the small town that I grew up with, been in and out of jail, or, missing like all their teeth, have had serious problems with things like crack and meth and alcohol. And this is because their parents, had problems with it, and their grandparents had problems with it. And so in order to change this around, that's going to be a major feat. I mean, because you're not just getting the person free, breaking them free of alcohol. You're not just breaking them free of the drugs. You're breaking them free of mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual controls that have been passed down like 4 generations. So you have to get, the kids young and kind of offer them, like a whole new way, I think, of thinking, which means getting them away from, like the mainstream education systems. Nevada, well, we could argue that we have 53 states in the United States. We don't just have 50. We have Puerto Rico, we have the Jefferson State, and a few other, little things in there. So, but out of all of them, it turns out that Nevada is ranked the lowest in education, higher education and lower education. We are at like the bottom of the list here. And if you look at the chronic alcoholism, the gambling, the 24-hour lifestyle, the drugs, you can start to see, how that hereditarily has played out on the people who live here, and what it has, slowly done to just the kids starting out in the educational programs. So, you don't have kids that are, making it very long in the educational system, but then there's no jobs for them to go to. And, it would have been different, like at the, turn of the century and all those, because You could literally leave home at 10 years old and go work and get a job and make money, and be able to support yourself. And, those are not options that people have now. Now they have the welfare option, which is like, you have to, your parents make more money from you being on the welfare system or the foster care system. And so they need you to stay at the home till 18. And then you're not learning any job skills, and you're learning their behavior, which is drinking, drugs, or whatever else. And then not probably eating very well either, not having very good nutrition, not having a very good lifestyle. And then at 18, they don't make money off you anymore, or they're not getting, subsidized money off you anymore. And then they just kick you out, and you have no life skills on getting a job, having a bank account, driving a car. I'm shocked at like how many millennials don't even know how to drive a car, and don't want a driver's license, and don't want insurance, or don't want to have any kind of responsibility.
I'm 60 and I don't want to drive a car, and I don't want to have a license, and I don't want any kind of that responsibility.
Yeah, but it might be different if you were like 19.
Yeah, 19s have a lot of years to go until they get to be 61.
Yeah, a lot of time to go until they're 61, right?
I'm an old man.
So, that it's interesting how there's like we just have like, where I'm living and what I see is like a hereditary, checked out state. And people pop out of the womb and they live their life that way until they die young, die homeless, don't have a lot of skills, on how to make things work, don't have coping skills for sure. And I think because, of the systems that they've grown up in, they have a lot more inability to be able to communicate with other people, or debate, or negotiate, or be able to conflict resolution.
Yeah, we give people credit for a lot of comprehension of advanced topics, but we never teach basic topics at all. And by the time people get out of school, from 18 to 34 years old, you sort of get raped by the system and taken advantage of by everybody who knows how to work the system, so that by the time you get to be 34 years old, you're cynical and bent on the whole thing, but you're now in a position where you can do something about it, or at least make your life less miserable. And so it buys people into a system and sticks them there, and they don't get out of it. And then midlife crisis happens at 45 years old, and people melt down because the illusions of the reality they live in aren't the reality of the illusions that they actually live in. And people have escaped from reality.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really sad that people don't really have life skills. Like I end up in my practice in the past, so when I was like 31 is when, I found out I kind of had brain cancer, and it was pretty significant. Most people that have brain cancer don't usually survive, because by the time you find out about it, you're having, blackouts and speech problems, and, it's just, it's pretty crazy. But because of that, because I had to kind of fix my brain cancer naturally, I got about 35, and I think my midlife crisis actually hit at like 35, because it was kind of like this moment where, also during the process of having brain cancer, once I found out what was wrong with me, I decided to take a shamanism approach. And the ancient type of shamanism that I study is celibacy. Women are trained not to feed men energy anymore by having sexual relationships with them, and then to recapitulate your energy back in, because, you're like a plug-in, right? You're like a wall plug-in, and people plug into you in all different kinds of ways, and they feed off of you and drain you and usually die. And shamanism type I study and practice is that, people plug into you or your field and they drain you dry. And so you don't really die of cancer. That may be the language that's used about your death, but really what's happened is that all the energy has been drained out of your sphere, your luminous, battery pack, and then you suffocate to death, basically what's happened. So I decided to I was working with some friends of mine and they were like, well, take an oath of something, you know what I mean? Kind of when I found out that I finally had, after a year, figured out I had brain cancer. And so I couldn't take a vow of silence and all this other stuff. So I decided to go back to the shamanism stuff and take an oath of celibacy. And I thought, well, I'm just going to do this for like a year. And so it's kind of interesting to watch how even early 30s, a lot of what I was trained to do, I'm going to call baiting. And I know that's going to be really harsh for some people out there. But women are raised, and there's usually not a vocabulary that goes along with a lot of this stuff, but you're taught to be bait, because you need to have a guy and you need to have a husband and you need to follow, the mainstream protocol. And even though I didn't have a family that kind of had those mindsets, it was just average society pruning you as a woman, to kind of go to the highest bidder. And, or whoever just wanted to marry you. And even if you didn't really care about them or whatever, you did it for some kind of security. And a lot of this stuff really started coming up when I took this oath of celibacy, kind of interesting things. And, I started to see why I would shave my legs or shave my armpits or, back before that, I had a pretty good modeling career for 13 years. Actually, it probably went on longer, maybe 20 years. But after that, I didn't really care. Once I started moving down the oath of celibacy, I didn't really care about if I shaved my legs or my armpits. I really started to really see how consumed women are with what they smell like and what they look like and how they're manicured. And Chris Rock did a really funny thing, a comedian thing, where he talked about how fake women are, because you never know what you're going to get with a woman. You can get fake boobs and fake eyelashes and fake hair, dye your hair, get a weave. And so fake, eye color, lenses, and, a tummy tuck or a push-up bra that pushes your boobs way high, or, all these things to tuck and roll. And so when a guy meets women, he doesn't really know what he's going to get, until all the stuff is unveiled, and then he knows what he's going to have, and what he's going to get, because
well, that's reality. It's like a bunch of Russian dolls.
Yeah, no, that's it. And you don't really know what's really on the inside. But it was interesting, as I moved towards, down this path of celibacy, and I became less interested in going out with people or going to have drinks or, socializing on a grand scale. And I just really started to see just in my own life. So when I was about 35, I had this midlife crisis, and I came to this point of oh my God, I'm so glad I didn't have kids, because once I started to listen to my own mind and really feel my own self without this level of social programming me as a woman and blah, 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 I would have gone down the road to have kids. And I really like kids. I don't mind working with kids. I want to help kids in the future, but I think it would have been really detrimental to me to have had kids myself. And this is the kind of lifestyle that I have. I'm kind of more of a nomad, which is not a really good lifestyle, to have kids. But I didn't really recognize this until I started moving out of the program. And also the programming of that, I didn't really want to be married either. I didn't really want to have to negotiate with another person about my life. If I want to go to India and study yoga for 2 months, I want to, do that. I want to save the money, get the airplane ticket. And having a white picket fence with 2.5 children, and having, to look a certain way, and all these things would have not allowed me to be able to kind of follow my own heart. And so I started really working with me and my God, me and my Creator, and my relationship to the Creator, because I follow kind of more of an indigenous lifestyle. And so all of this other stuff, these social mechanisms that people are trained in and hereditarily trained in, keep you from listening to your Creator. Whether your Creator is nature and you're learning from nature, or your Creator is your dog. I've learned a lot from my dog, Jen. She's like so unbelievably amazing at the things that she knows and the things that she teaches me. Or my Creator is something that's more out there, or that's giving me information. So all of these social mechanisms, are hereditary. And how do you listen to your God? How do you listen to your spirit? How do you, work with that information and follow it where you need to go? Like, people want to talk about manifesting or co-creating. Well, if you have all these hereditary social mechanisms, there's no way that you can follow your bliss. There's no way that you can manifest your reality, because you're not even connected within your reality or to the creation, learning how to be a co-creator, following the flow and going where you're led to go, at any given moment. And I'm not saying it's an easy lifestyle. It's a really difficult lifestyle. I mean, I've lived kind of pretty much in my van and on the go. I mean, there's been a lot of other really negative things. The powers that be, really spent a lot of years putting me out of private practice, and starving me out, because they didn't really want people healthy and they didn't really want me talking to people. I had a huge private practice where people came to see me, would come to town for several weeks and have sessions with me, and I was booked out 3 months in advance. And I saw anywhere from 6 to 7 people, sometimes 6 days a week. And so, they eradicated all of that, and destroyed it and starved me. So, kind of also a lot of it was forced into even being more nomadic and breaking, whatever kind of hereditary social mechanisms that were, maybe still kind of keeping me working towards, fitting in the social structures.
Yeah, I found that I, in my life, detached from social structures early on, but because I was a scientist in a laboratory and went to work in one structure and came home to a different structure, it worked for a while, but the pressure of having to earn enough money to make a decent living and deal with the hypocrisy of the system at the same time got to the point where I was spread way too thin and I had no income coming in, but was putting out a lot of significant work. And what income I did have going in was being reallocated by my partner at the time, who just went off into her own little world and never came back out. And so there's so many different things in life that we get thrown to deal with, and it can really change overnight, and it's a matter of perspective. But allowing people to catch their own perspective by giving them time alone, people are afraid of their time alone. They don't know what to do, and they get bored when I love my time alone. I wouldn't give it up for anything. But maybe
Yes,
I
I'm in the
would
same
for some
boat.
things in
Yeah.
temporary situation, because you need people, but you don't need people. But in essence, we're rewriting social structure from human scale. And so much of what we deal with is corporate scale or country scale or even local human local humanity scale of going into a town or city is way different than human scale of just dealing with your immediate family, friends, and social organization. But I would be interested to know how many people an average person deals with during their day. So if people could come up with a system of counting from the time they wake up to the time they go to sleep, the number of people that they at least say hello to, that might be a very interesting number to get a count to see what an individual human radius really is. But some days, the only people I say hello to are Einstein and Tripod and Izzy the Wonder Dog. And I don't see another person for the rest of the day.
Yeah, that's the thing is like out in the desert, if a landowner left early in the day, like I probably didn't talk to anybody except for animals. And then, it's weird because now I'm in the city and I'm living on the third story right now in a condo building. And I have to talk to all these people like in the hall. As soon as I like come out of the door, there's all these other people in the building, and so that you have to talk to and say hello to or want to know what's going on or whatever else, by the time you get out into your car. And then all the other people that you see. So I think also it depends on, where you're living, your social structure.
Well,
obviously,
not only that,
your
but
social structures.
I think a half an hour walking through a grocery store, you probably encounter 100 people, maybe 200. And I don't do grocery stores. I do very limited grocery shopping at outlets. But so I can figure out a way to avoid people most of the time. And so for me, if I can get down to a point where there's less than 5 people there, my comfort level is very, very high. But if I'm in a building with 25 to 100 people and everybody's got different flowing emotions, I can't do that. I can do rock concerts because everybody's into the music and the emotions are flowing together. But I can't do crowds of people unless I'm the one on stage talking to the crowd. But I have no problem with being the person on stage talking to the crowd. So you're going to be talking to Jordan Maxwell on Saturday. Why don't you give everybody details of how they can get a hold of that programming?
Okay, well, once it's archived, I try to put it out like Wednesday or Thursday after the show. It'll go on my YouTube channel and with other stuff. And that's Consciousness of Economics and the and sign Urban Farm Project YouTube channel. And then the show's live. My show's live usually on Saturdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 3 p.m. And on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And I think you can listen to Revolution Radio on the app.
TuneIn app. And it's Studio A.
Or you can go, Studio A, 1 p.m. Eastern. And also, if you go to the website, if you go to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, you go to the website, there'll be schedule. You click on schedule. It'll give you A or B. You want to click on A. And then you can scroll down Studio A. And it's where the big bee with pollen picture is. There's a big bee flying towards a flower. And that's my show. And you can click on that page, and it'll give you some bio information about me and also contact information. And then I have, so live every Saturday. And so this week I do have Jordan Maxwell. So it's going to be pretty cool. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, he's the biggest fish that I've ever had on my show, so I'm kind of excited about it. I like him because he's a realistic, he's kind of a nomad, kind of person. I think that he's broke through a lot of his social constructs years ago. He's like one of the world's authority on language, symbology. Like he can go back a long, long time and show, the controllers that still control, our reality now. He talks a lot about how the legal system works.
Can you ask him about how he thinks time works? And if he's thought about the concept that maybe people from the current time are traveling back in time to write the fiction that is guiding us through the present time to a future that's changing from a past that's fluid, or some sort of question like that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if he does with like time, time continuum stuff, but he can go back, thousands and thousands of years and shows that the people that wrote the script, thousands and thousands of years ago are still in control of our script today.
Yeah, and we'll be in control of the next script unless we write our own new narratives, right?
Yeah, the thing is, like, I think that I've been playing with this whole idea, watching these people with these other channels and some of the information, like that they're presenting. And one of the things that is becoming apparent is that the powers that be or whatever, the controllers have been knocking down these buildings that had ether power, free energy power, and also knocking down areas. I just really watched this really on the Global Vision. I love that guy. He's Russian, from Russia. And he's showing a lot of the free energy stuff, but he had a guy video he put up on his thing, and it was called the Sri Lanka Free Energy Sri Lanka Caves. And there was this Indian guy from India who's talking about these two particular places that give off this frequency. One looks to have been dismantled, and he talks about that area as it was a porthole where people could walk into it, like beam me up, Scotty, beam me in, beam me out, and that because it's been dismantled, it doesn't really work the way that it did. So I think, sometimes I wonder if they're like closing the holes, so Truman can't get off the show. You know what I mean? And I think that a lot of these areas where we could have gotten out of the show, right, walked past the perimeter or the boundary, or drove or whatever else and gotten off the show, the Truman Show, have been closed. So
once you get off the show, you can't get back in.
Huh?
Once you get off the show, you can't get back in. But how many people have left the show and are cutouts?
I think at one time you could come and go through these portholes. But I think like less and less these old technology portholes have been closed by the powers that be, so people can't really escape and can't leave.
And the new technology portholes are hidden beneath so much complexity of the technology that people get sucked into the narratives that are created for them instead of being who they are and running their own lives.
Well, and I wouldn't want to go through some of these, modern portholes, because I think a lot of them go nowhere. I know that a lot of the portholes that have been established by Native people were created to keep white people from walking and trespassing on their lands. And a lot of those portholes that they open go nowhere. So once you step into them, you can't get out of them ever. And nobody ever releases you from them because nobody knows where you're at. So, you have to be really careful about opening and closing portholes and, things of this nature and going in and out of them. Because you don't really know what you're going to get, in that process. And like, the age-old shamans, like some of them that have like the more of the 10,000-year-old practices, they had to train you in critical thinking, so that way if you did walk into some of these worlds, you were prepared to deal with them. Whether you did it straight or you did it on dreaming medicines like dreaming world medicines like ayahuasca and DMT and these things, because you go into some of these areas and they're not always nice beings, and they may appear to be nice beings, but when you pop into their radar, they're like, oh, hey, look at that. They know that you're there, and they know exactly what they need to say to you and do. So you have to be really careful, because you can meet obstacles in some of these places that you're not going to be able to deal with because you don't have the critical thinking process developed. And a lot of the ancient old shamans, they like to, ones that practice the old stuff, they look for people who have the ability to critically think, because you can't just travel through a lot of these areas without the ability to critically think, because like you could have events or obstacles or beings that you're going to have to deal with, and they always will pull the upper hand on you. If they're higher evolved beings, they're not going to just be like nice to you. They're going to challenge you a little bit, and in some cases, a lot of them want to piggyback in, right? Because there's a lot of energy here and a lot of wasted energy all over the place. People leak their energy all over the place here. I mean, beings would totally want to come here because it's like, for them, it's like free energy everywhere. Everybody's, luminous spheres have been leaked all over.
Yeah, we
all
need...
over the place. They can just scoop up the energy.
We absolutely need a new way on Steampunk Radio. On your listening dial through the TuneIn app, I'm Dr. Lenny Thyme. This is my friend Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, and we're glad that you've been listening to the New Way radio show here on Steampunk Radio. 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 Okay.
And steam with 2 E's.
Steam it with 2 E's, yes. So now we got our necessary perspective in. We've got 3 minutes left. Isn't the world a strange place all of a sudden? I have been paying no attention to what's going on in the outside world, but I can feel the energies ebb and flow. And when I watch YouTube at this point, half the people I watch on YouTube I turn off within the first 2 or 3 minutes because they're hooked on this cult of personality, and they're talking about what somebody else said and ruminating on what they meant and stuff, and they're not at all working on human scale. So I appreciate you coming here and talking to us about your experiences on human scale, because each of us has different experiences, and that's what we need, is to be allowed to withdraw into ourself as a one, be self-creative and self-selected, and then broadcast each other around the world so that people get to hear differences of opinion.
Yeah, and the other thing too is going back to the thyroid and iodine. Something I was thinking about.
Yes.
Is if you're iodine depleted and your thyroid is not working well, you will hallucinate. So if sometimes people come in, to my practice, and they'll be like, yeah, I'm having these intense, spiritual experiences or whatever else going on. And then it actually turns out to be like a severe hormone imbalance. And once they get on iodine, a lot of those hallucinations will go away. So it's really important, as a spiritual practice, to really take care of the body and make sure it has all the nutrient necessary to help you energize, the other side of that, which is more of a spiritual processes and spiritual journeys and whatever else, instead of a hallucination, because, you can be on either side of that.
Wait.
The body can be a predictor, of which side you're on.
I think life is all a hallucination. Isn't it a holograph? A delusion?
Well, but you want to be in control of the hallucination, right? Which is your body's healthy and it's streamlined. And, Rudolf Steiner has a really great quote, you continue to eat from unhealthy soil and you'll be trapped in the body that will become your prison. And that's kind of like, the fact. And Rudolf Steiner has a lot of great, if people are interested, How to Know Higher Worlds. He has like all these great books on, traveling and spiritual exploration of the highest extent as well.
Okay, and we are done. And so, thank you again, Bridgette. That was awesome. Good conversation.